Hi, I'm Miss Sarah, and this is At Home Makerspace, where every week I show you how to make fun projects with things you can find at home. In this week's video, I'll be showing you how you can grow your own plants from seeds. Some people like to start their plants outside, but I wanted to show you how you can start your plants inside using seedling starters. These seedling starters help the plants to grow big and strong indoors before you take them outdoors to weather the elements. In this video, we'll be using recycled materials you probably already have around the house, like eggshells, cardboard tubes, and recycled paper. Even better, all of these materials are biodegradable, but more on that later. And speaking of time, you might be wondering, what's the best time to start your seeds? Well, it depends on where you live, what the weather is like, and what kinds of seeds you'll be using. I'll be including a link to a planting calendar that can help you get a better idea of the best time to plant your seeds. All right, let's go ahead and get started by making our seedling starters. One way to make a seedling starter is by using cardboard tubes, like toilet paper tubes or paper towel tubes. Now, I think these starters are probably the easiest to make, but I was the least successful at growing plants with this type of starter. I have some reasons why I think that might have been, but we'll get to that later. All you'll need is a cardboard tube and a pair of scissors. The first thing we'll do is take our cardboard tube and flatten it. Make sure to press down on the edges so you get a nice crease. We want to make our paper towel tube into a square, so we're going to flatten it a second time. And as you can see, we now have a square shape. Since the tube is a bit tall for one seed starter, I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. If you're using a longer tube, you might cut it into thirds or fourths. Next, you'll want to cut some slits in all four corners. Mine are between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch long. After you've made all four cuts, you'll want to fold the flaps down towards the middle of the tube like this. Repeat this with all four sides. And we're actually going to try overlapping our four flaps to hold it in place. If you've ever done this trick with a cardboard box, it's the same way. I'm folding 3 of them down like so, and then my last one will go under one of the flaps and over the other to hold everything in place. And the small gap at the bottom will let extra water go through. Next, I'll show you how to make seedling starters using eggshells. Now, these starters were definitely the messiest to make, but as you'll see later, they worked really well. You'll need some eggs, a small bowl to collect the insides of the eggs, a pan with water and something to heat it over, a ladle or long-handled spoon, and a pushpin or needle. Our first step will be to crack our egg here on the top and remove the insides. So I'm tapping my egg until the shell cracks, and then gently peeling back that cracked shell until I've created a hole that's large enough for me to get the insides of the egg into my bowl. This can be a little bit messy, and you may end up with some eggshell in your eggs. So if, like me, you're planning to use the eggs to cook with, make sure to remove the eggshell from the eggs before you cook with it. Alright, so now I have my hollowed out egg. Next, we're going to wash out our eggshells to remove as much of the remaining egg as possible. And then, to make sure everything is as clean as possible, we're going to place our eggshells in boiling water for a few minutes. Use your ladle or long-handled spoon to push the eggs down so the insides will fill with hot water as well. Finally, our last step will be poking a small hole in the bottom of our eggshell. I'm using a pushpin to do this, but you could also use a needle. And this part is kind of tricky. I'm sort of gently pushing against the eggshell, rocking it back and forth until the pushpin goes in. If you need a grown-up to help you with this part, feel free to grab them. And that is what my final eggshell starter looks like. Finally, I'll show you how to make seedling starters using thin paper like newspaper or the inside of an old phone book. Just make sure that the paper isn't glossy or shiny or have any kind of a coating on it. I found this technique took me the longest time to learn how to do correctly, but it was my most successful seedling starter. You'll need some thin, not shiny paper like a newspaper or phone book, and a jar with a wide opening. First, you'll want to layer 2 sheets of paper, like so. Then grab your jar, make sure the lid is off, and place it on top of the paper so that the jar hangs over the edge a little bit. Now roll it all the way up, and we now have a tube of paper. Now crinkle up the extra at the top of the tube and push it down into the opening of your jar. Slide the jar out, and from the inside, push down on that crinkled paper to make it as flat as possible. I'm going to now roll down the top of my pot to help hold this open edge in place. And as you can see, my paper wasn't particularly big, so I am having a little bit more difficulty getting my edge to stay closed. But if I just keep rolling down the top, it will eventually hold in place. If you're having a lot of trouble with this, you can use a small piece of tape to hold it in place, and you can simply remove that piece of tape when it's time to transplant your pot. But as promised, if I just kept working at it, it all held in place, and here is my final pot. If you're going to make a starter with a smaller jar, you might want to fold your in half like this, rather than layering 2 sheets of paper on top of one another. If you use a full sheet, it ends up being too tall, and it's really hard to crinkle up all that extra paper. Once you've finished making your seedling starters, it's time to plant your seeds. But maybe you're wondering, what kinds of seeds should I plant? Well, I would say the first thing you should do is check out what kind of plants will grow well in your area. I'll include links to some websites with some more information, but you could also head to your local garden center and ask the people who work there, or you can check out the information on the back of your seed packets. For my video, I decided to plant some sunflowers, some cucumber, and some green beans. Now I chose these things because they sprout pretty quickly, usually in just a week or two, which works well for a video when you only have a few weeks to make it. These are the seeds I'll be using when I show you how to plant seeds in your seedling starters. You'll need some soil, and something like a small spoon to use to scoop your soil into your containers, some water, mine is in a spray bottle, some seeds, and of course your seed starters. If your soil is dry like mine is, the first thing you'll want to do is add some water to your soil to moisten it. Give it a stir to spread the around around the soil and test if it feels damp enough. If not, go ahead and add some extra water. You want the soil to feel moist but not soggy. Grab one of your seed starters, and you'll also need a seed. For a seed starter this small, I'm only going to use one seed, but for seed starters that are larger, you can plant multiple seeds in the same starter. Next, fill your starter with some of our damp soil. Make sure to press down on the soil lightly with the back of your spoon or even your fingers. I'm just going to test that it feels damp enough, and I actually think I'm going to add a bit more water to this one. Then I'm going to continue filling my starter with soil. Once again, if your soil still feels a bit dry, you can add some extra water. Now I'm going to use one finger and press down into the middle of the cup so I get a hole. Then I'm going to place the seed inside of the hole and cover it up. Be sure to check the directions on your seed packets to know how deep you should plant your seed. You can use exactly the same process to plant the seeds in your other starters. I planted cucumbers in my cardboard tubes, green beans in my eggshells, and sunflowers in my recycled paper. As you may have noticed, I chose to plant my sunflowers in my largest starters. That's because of all of my seeds, sunflowers needed the most room to grow. When you're trying to decide which starter to make, you might want to consider how much room your seeds will need to grow and which starter will be the best fit. Place your seedling starters in front of a sunny window, and I actually put mine on a baking tray to catch any extra water. You may also notice that I made some little stands for my eggshells by cutting some rings out of another toilet paper tube. And now we wait for our seedlings to grow. Remember to water your seedlings anytime the soil feels dry, and after a week or two, you should have some brand new baby plants. Here's what happened with my plants. So after 2 weeks, 5 of my 9 seedlings sprouted. As far as those seeds that didn't sprout, I have a couple of theories about this. So one theory is that my seeds may have been too old. They were actually about 5 years old, and sometimes older seeds just don't sprout. The other theory is that I may have over or underwatered some of my seed starters. The eggshell ones tended to stay really moist, and it was really easy to overwater them. and the cardboard tubes tended to dry out really quickly, and so the soil may not have been damp enough for my seeds to sprout. When your seedlings are big enough, it's time to transplant them outside. A rule of thumb is that your seedlings should have at least 2 sets of leaves before you transplant them. Now, some people recommend something called hardening off your plants, which means slowly introducing them to the outdoor environment. You can do this by taking your plants outside for a few hours at a time, and make sure you set them somewhere that's a bit shaded and not too windy. You can start by taking them outside for an hour or 2 on the first day, then add an hour the second day, and so on until your plants are used to being outside. This will make it much easier for the plants to survive when you transplant them outside. Now, do any of you remember in my introduction when I mentioned that all of the materials for our seedling starters were biodegradable? That means that all of this material will break down in the soil. And we decided to use biodegradable materials for our seedling starters because we can plant the entire starter in the ground. This is a great option because the roots of our seedlings are very fragile and can easily be damaged by trying to remove the plant from its starter. By using biodegradable materials and planting the whole thing, it means we won't have to disturb our roots, and it'll be a lot better when we transplant our plants outside. Now, I'm going to show you how to do this, but keep in mind my plants aren't really big enough to transplant yet. I just wanted to show you an example of how you would do it. To transplant, you'll need your seedlings, a space outdoor to plant your seedlings, something like a trowel to dig a hole, and a watering can or spray bottle to water your plants. Start by watering your seedling thoroughly before transplanting it. Next, you'll want to dig a hole in the soil at least as deep as your seedling starter. Now I can plant the whole thing in the ground and cover the edges with soil. You'll want to water your seedling once again, so grab your watering can and give it a nice soak. You might need to move the soil back around the seedling if your watering disturbs it. Now you can sit back and watch it grow. We hope you enjoyed learning how to make biodegradable seed starters with things you probably already have around the house. If you do plant some seeds, we'd love to see them, so please take a picture and share it with us at the library. You can do so through our Facebook at www.facebook.com/FHCPL, through our Instagram. Our handle is @FHCPL, or you can send us an email. Our email address is makerspace@finleylibrary.org. If you enjoy watching things grow, be sure to join us again next week, where we'll delve into the science of seeds and what seeds need to grow. See you then. Bye.